Hello guys, welcome to our podcast. In this episode, we are going to talk about communicative language teaching today. So, welcome Kathy and Lisbeth. Please, Kathy, can you start?
Okay, first of all, the communicative approach has been implemented in the 19th. So nowadays it's really common to use not only the communicative approach, so in some cases teachers use more traditional methods. As in my case, the teacher just focus their classes not in communicative approach, but in traditional approaches like grammar recognition method and that kind of things.
Yeah, also CLT focuses on role learners, not being the teacher. Teacher is just seen as a guide for students. And also, as you mentioned, nowadays teachers don't use this method appropriately because they focus more on teach the topic, but not if they understand the topic.
And do you think that you can implement CLT like in your practicum with your current classes, or maybe it's difficult?
Well, in my case, I consider that it's quite difficult because the students are not accustomed to that kind of method. But if we propose some activities meaningful activities that engage the students, it could be great and could be something helpful for them.
Yeah, I agree with you. Also, we can use CMT because it can be adaptable for different students. Since we can have with different skills, or maybe that someone learns lower than others. Also, we can see CMT not just it as something that difficult the learning, but as something that we can recognize because in my practical I have some students that are like students from adaptation, and teachers make for them some kind of different activities for them. Even in the exams, the teachers create for those students a different exam for them.
Yeah. In my case, I have the same situation, but from my point of view, I think that the teachers, adapt the content to these students, but they usually don't apply the CLT method. They are more like complete this worksheet or read this thing, very basic things that maybe these things don't help to the students to really learn English and acquire the language. So I think maybe in this part, Ecuadorian teachers can improve to help all the students independent of their necessities. Also, another important thing is that in communicative language teaching we have 8 major changes. That, for example, learner autonomy, as you said, they have the choice tool in their own learning. For example, they can choose the content and also the process, their learning process. And the social nature of learning. Learning is not individual, it's something that is social, and we have to interact with others to learn in a better way. And the curricular integration, this is an important thing because English is not seen as a standalone subject, but is linked with, to other subjects. For example, some days ago, our teacher in the practicum, she carried out a project, a pollution project, and and basically students combine the English with other subjects, for example, natural science and something like that. So I think it's a very good idea to implement and to link English with other subjects. So in that way, the students can reflect more and be more critical with other things, not only English. Now we have the focus of meaning, that basically meaning is viewed as the driving force of learning, and the diversity that you also mentioned, because the students have very different ways of learning and very different strengths. So we as teachers, we have to take into account all of these differences to create a model that works for everyone. And yeah, we have the teaching skills, and basically communicative language teaching try to develop higher order thinking skills.
Yes, that is something interesting that teachers need to emphasize their teaching practices to develop communicative competences as well. And of course that it's important that the teachers take into account the context that the students have to apply to different activities or something like that. And it's important the age of the students, the level, the goal that they need to achieve to apply this kind of activities.
Yeah, that's something interesting, and also as Alison mentioned, some teachers teach English in other subjects. I had the opportunity last semester to work with a teacher that teach social studies in English, and the students were very good at English too, because they also have the subject of English, a part of social studies, and they were very good. They were very good at their skills of understanding the context of English, and also it's something important as you mentioned the age, because they used to teach English from kindergarten, and at the second grade of school the students are very good at English. So it's very important also to consider the age to begin teaching English students.
Another important thing here is the alternative assessment, because in communicative language teaching they said we have new forms of assessment, and we can replace the traditional, for example, multiple choice and so on, that only test lower order skills. So instead of use that, we can use multiple forms of assessment like observations, interviews, journals, portfolios, to build a comprehensive picture of what students learn. I think it's a good idea, but for me, I think it's not necessary to replace all the traditional tests. For example, I think multiple choice is a better way to assess the knowledge of the students or something like that. So yeah, I think it's a good idea if we try to combine these traditional tests with our communicative language teaching test that I already mentioned. So what do you think about that?
I agree. I think those kind of evaluations are very good in students to see the development during schools. So as you mentioned, also it is important to take into account the learning process, not just the products that they have at the end of the classes, but it's most important to take into account the meaningful learning that they have in the class.
Okay, that is something interesting. And from my perspective, I consider that the activities just not to be communicative activities. Maybe what about if the activities are interesting or engaging for the students? It could be better, right? So that's why it's important to consider all of that aspects. And I think that when the students are doing different activities, we make them the time to reflect on what they're doing, or allow their errors or their mistakes, because it's part of the learning process, I think.
Yes. So I think we already mentioned all of important things about communicative language teaching. So, like to sum up this topic, we have to remember that in this method, teachers are viewed as facilitators, and we have to take into account the different ways of learning, the different like students that we have, and adapt the content to them. In this way, we can have a really good English class. So, yeah, if you want to add something else.
Just in CLT, it focuses in the learning process, not in the product, and also we have to have a better or pay more attention in the meaningful learning of students.
So it's important to mention as well that the students are supposed to develop fluency and accurately. So it's important that the students enjoy the learning process, and that is something for them.
So, thank you so much, girls.
Thank you.
See you